نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقوموا لله قانتين فإن خفتم فرجالا أو ركبانا فإذا أمنتم فاذكروا الله كما علمكم ما لم تكونوا تعلمون والذين يتوفون منكم ويذرون أزواجا وصية لأزواجهم متاعا إلى الحول غير إخراج فإن خرجن فلا جناح عليكم فيما فعلن في أنفسهن من معروف والله عزيز حكيم وللمطلقات متاع بالمعروف حقا على المتقين كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تعقلون. Respectful honorable friends, the verses that we have been busy with recently are various injunctions with regards to talaq. In last week's Quran session, Quran Tafseer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made mention with regards a couple of rulings pertaining with the mahar, the dowry. In the verse that I've just recited to you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completes this ruku and also for a while completes mention of talaq, etc. But in between, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a verse or two with regards to something which seems apparently totally different to what we have been doing. And as you know, this is the usloob, the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He doesn't just bring one topic, it just completes, like you find the Quran isn't like other books where you have a chapter specific to do with one aspect, another chapter to do with something else. Because obviously verses were revealed at various times according to various needs. So the times wherein the last verses were to do with something and then there was a need for another wahi, revelation to be revealed and something else was then revealed. And at times there are mention is made of something totally different, but there is still a link with that to the verses before it and the verses after it. In this verse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقوموا لله قانتين. Now previously mention was made with regards, somebody else is in front of you, bacha khel raha hai to distract me. Somebody else is in front of me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a verse to do with salat. And He says, حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقوموا لله قانتين. It says, be safeguarding upon your salat. وَالصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى and the middle salat. وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ and stand for Allah, meaning in front of Allah with humility. In this verse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us three things which are very, very important. One, He says, حَافِظُوا عَلَى الصَّلَوَاتِ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He doesn't say perform your salat or establish salat as this injunction, but Allah says حَافِظُوا. In the Quran we find nowhere does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say that read salat or perform salat. This word hasn't been utilized at all anywhere in the Quran. And there's a reason for this. Because there's a big difference in performing salah and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says aqimi salah, establish salah. And here He uses the word hafizu, that protect, be safeguarding upon your salat. So the big difference in the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses. And there's great wisdom and reason why these words have been chosen and not just perform salat. Because unfortunately we when we speak to people and we advise people, we say to them, perform salah, perform salah. So everybody hears, perform salah, namaz paro, namaz paro. So they think, well, here and there when they do these salahs now and then, so they say, well, we are reading our salat. So a person reads and performs salah, now and then they say, well, I am performing salah. You say perform salah, so I am performing salah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, aqim as-salah, establish salat. I don't want to go into the details of tafsir of the verse, aqim as-salah. But there we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, establish salat. That means to establish something. And we know ourselves that we like to also establish various projects, establish various buildings, ideas. And in doing so we know that this is now establishment. Something which is now concrete will say establishment. Something that you just do now and then is a hobby, is a leisure. You won't regard that to be something that is established. Something that takes place or a business that a person opens now and then doesn't take serious. You won't say this is an established business. But that which now opens daily and the business is run daily, we will say that this is an established business. So for it to be established, the roots need to be firm and embedded. In the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't just perform salah, but establish salat, so that your roots are firmly embedded, so that under no condition at all can this tree be uprooted from you. Under all conditions, it will remain embedded. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that establish salat, so it becomes part and parcel of a person's life. And here He says, hafizu, because there will be those people who do perform their salat, and there will be those who are punctual on their salat. But then there will be so many occasions wherein a person who is punctual upon salat also now forgoes their salat. Why? Because they're busy shopping somewhere. They went shopping somewhere, they went to a shopping mall, so they thought, well, we can't eat salat here. Or they went visiting somewhere, they went to some playground somewhere, they went to a park, theme park somewhere, or they went to visit a relative somewhere, they went to a wedding, they went to the airport. Various places people go, and what happens is they forgo their salat. And they think that while we are travelling in a moment, or there isn't the facilities for us to perform our salat, or basically just well we read it when we go home. And especially this verse is quite appropriate for the season that we are in. The season wherein Zahar, Asr, Maghrib seem to be just one long salat together, when there's hardly any time in between. If a person needs to do anything, it has to be before Zahar or after Maghrib. You can't plan to do anything in between. So this verse is appropriate during this period of time, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look, hafizu ala salawat. So people of England, in the winter time when you decide tomorrow is Saturday that you want to do your shopping, etc., then fair enough, do your halal shopping, go to the shopping malls, wherever you need to go. But go in such a way that you do not forego your salat. Be safeguarding with regards to your salat. And this is something which we greatly neglect. When we're at home, and when we're in normal circumstances, we'll be punctual with our salat. But the moment the circumstances change, we are not in our normal surroundings, in our normal conditions, then we find that we forego our salat. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, hafizu, be safeguarding upon your salat. So irrelevant of what condition you are in, you should still be performing your salat. If you are travelling, and you can't avoid, but you have to travel during the salat times, fair enough, do your travelling. But when the time of salat comes, be safeguarding of that. Just the way you'll see to all other needs, see to this need as well. Make sure that you have enough water with you, or make sure that you can stop somewhere and perform your salat on the route. You go shopping, go and choose an appropriate time. And if it so happens that you have to go during salat time, then make sure that you make it to the local masjid somewhere, or find a spot somewhere where in a car park or in some corner somewhere in a shopping mall, if you go to the airport somewhere at the airports, etc., find an appropriate place wherein now you can safeguard your salat. Under no circumstances should a person forego their salat. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here that hafizu, be safeguarding, which is very, very important. That just the way a person will make sure to safeguard and be protective of everything else, make sure that the homes are locked up and everything, the alarm and everything is secure, so nothing can be stolen, nothing can be taken away from them. People travel also to make sure that everything is taken with them, the bags are packed properly and secure and whatever. In the same way, hafizu ala salawat, make sure that whatever you do, whatever venture you undertake, have you secured the salat or not? Whatever you're going to do, is your salat going to be secure in it or not? Person goes for a job proposal, make sure immediately from day one that are you going to be able to perform your salat or not? Are you going to get a few minutes off here and there? Can you combine it with your lunch period or not? Can you now perform your salat whilst you're employed in that job? If it is possible, then fair enough. If not, look for another job. Look for something else. Why? Because the person will make sure that they can try and safeguard everything else. They want to make sure that they get the odd few 5 minutes here and there for a quick fag here and there. So for that, they make sure that I should get time for that. And for other things, they'll make sure that they can accommodate for these type of things. Person goes somewhere, whatever he does, every second week when there's a specific appointment, then you find everybody safeguards that appointment. Because they know how important it is. And they know that if they then miss that appointment, then that's it, there's no risk, there's no rosy for them. Isn't it? Whereas what we don't realize is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us that our rizq and our rosy is in salat. Our rizq and our rosy is in salat. But for that, we won't be so specific on that. When we make any appointments to see anybody, doctors or medical appointments and that, when we have the options, we don't think that does it correspond with salat time or not. And many a times what we don't realize is the person, when the appointment is being made, they've got a whole day, they've got various different times, they are willing to accommodate, but we don't want to accommodate salat. Because we don't want to accommodate for our salat, we want to say to them that do you have another appointment before, after, tomorrow, another day. We don't want to take any these type of chances, but we'll just say yes to anything that is given to us. There will be others who are willing to accommodate, but we find Muslims themselves wouldn't want to accommodate. Not long ago there was a brother who was mentioning, he was on his new workplace, whatever, and it so happened that with him was a non-Muslim. They stopped somewhere to perform the salat on the road, and when they reached there, they found that there was a specific room or something allocated for them to be performing salat in, or a private room or something, which was locked. So his colleague, who was a non-Muslim, he ensured and he made sure that that room would be opened up for him to perform salat in it. Because if he was closer, he knew that he could perform salat anywhere else. He would have performed outside, inside, somewhere in a corner. But a non-Muslim colleague made sure that they opened up that room so that he can perform his salat in that specific room. So there are people who are willing to accommodate. It is we who don't want to accommodate for our salat. And what we don't realize is that until we don't have the firm intention that we want to accommodate for our salat, we'll never be able to accommodate for it. There'll always seem to be a hurdle, there'll always be some form of an obstacle or an excuse wherein we will forego our salat because of some petty reasons. And if a person really wants to perform the salat, irrelevant of what the occasion may be, they will still be able to accommodate for it. Even if it's a wedding, so what if it's a wedding? Person can go to the wedding, go and have see the nikah, go for the meals, whatever, but it doesn't mean now a person has to remain there from the first minute to the last minute. A person does go out for other needs and other things, so a person can easily go perform the salat, etc. Unfortunately today we find so many times wherein the nikah and the eating, the meals and everything takes place in the masjid, and there will still be those people who are in the masjid, but can't in the masjid, the building, the complex, but they still can't just walk a few yards to make it into the actual masjid itself, the Jamaat Khana itself. Why? Because they haven't hafizu ala salawat. There will be that person who has a room adjacent next to the masjid also, but if salat isn't established within them, if they haven't secured the salat, then they'll be sleeping or living just next to the masjid, but they still won't be able to make it into the masjid. There are those people who for them, the masjid is just in the back door, the back garden is the masjid. Just walk out of the house and the masjid is just behind them or just in front of them. So near it is to them. But then too, they can't attend the salat. Why? Because they haven't secured and safeguarded the salat. So this is the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala drills into, that hafizu ala salawat, be safeguarding upon your salat. Not just perform it, but safeguard your salat. Was salatil wusta, and the middle salat. Now from all salats, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here specifies one specific one. And that is the middle one. Now the middle one, all the Mufassirin are unanimous, refers to Asr Salah. Why? Because there are 2 daytime salats prior to it, Fajr and Zuhr, and there is the 2 evening ones, Maghrib and Isha, after it. So they are unanimous. Salatul Wusta here means the middle one, and from 5, obviously the middle one would be Asr anyway, according to the written text. And also from the ahadith we find that Salatul Wusta here means Asr, as in Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself mentioned Salatul Wusta refers to Salatul Wusta, Salatul Asri. That the middle Salat refers to Salatul Asr. In the occasion of the battle of Ahzab, where we know that the Salatul Asr was then made qaza and was led later on, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned that Shagalu anis Salatul Wusta anis Salatul Asri. But he mentioned that the disbelievers, they have distracted us from the Salatul Wusta, from the middle Salat, and he mentioned the middle Salat referred to the Asr Salat, which is then read between Maghrib and Isha Salat. So Salatul Wusta specifically refers to the middle Salat, which is Asr Salat. And why this has mentioned is because the time for Asr is the main time when businesses are now at its peak or closing time. This is a time wherein now prices go down also to quickly sell whatever hasn't been sold during the day. This is a time when people know that this is a busy time. This is a time wherein it's picking up the children also time, isn't it? Asr time, especially in this season, is when people have to now rush, pick one child up from this school, pick another child from that school. There's so many things. During the Asr time is a peak rush time. Either people are coming home from work, coming home from school, from university, from various things. So this Asr time is a very busy time. For a businessman also, it's a time when now he takes his stocks of how the day went. He's now going to be closing his business, or he's waiting for the late arrivals, the late comers, or people now passing by because now they've left work or they've been around in that area. For various reasons, the Asr time is a very busy time, an important time during the day. Because Fajr time is early in the morning, Zohar is in the afternoon, and then Maghrib Isha is in the evening, and during that time obviously a person already is at home or tired. It's totally different to the Asr Salat itself. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically says that be punctual with the Asr Salat. And it also makes sense because so many people you find today, they will perform the Zohar Salat because it corresponds with the lunch time. But when it comes to Asr, they think to themselves, well, Asr and Maghrib is not too long, so I'll just read Asr after Maghrib. They say, well, I'll get home for Maghrib Salat, so I'll just read Asr after my Maghrib. Which means they forgo it and they make qaza of it afterwards. And this also is something which is very important, and that is there are many musallis who alhamdulillah will perform the 5 times salah, but in the 5 times salah, how many are performed as qaza? They may boast that they are performing the 5 times salah, which is better than the person not performing whatsoever, but from the 5, how many are qaza? Fajr, majority of the ummah, unfortunately, Fajr is qaza anyway. Very few are those who perform Fajr as Ada. Most of it is as Qaza anyway. Zohar, probably people read with Jamaat. Or probably Zohar and Asr. Fajr, Zohar, Asr predominantly are made Qaza. And Maghrib and Isha, because now it's in the evening, so person is already at home. So after Maghrib Salah, people are now performing the long Salahs. And you think what they're reading, but you realize they're reading the Asr Maghrib, they're reading the Asr Zohar, and they're reading the Fajr Salah. That's what happens. But what we don't realize is that it is haram to deliberately make a salat qaza. Although a person thinks that now they are reading the salat, it's better than not. But a person mustn't think that because they are reading it as qaza, so that they're doing something good. But to deliberately make salat qaza, this is haram. So a person should realize this also, that whenever you do make it deliberately qaza, it's haram for you to do so. And there are those who mention that it is a major sin. It's also a major sin to deliberately make your salah qaza. It's different wherein, due to some reason or circumstances, accidentally if it becomes qaza, which means that the qaza salat there is as an emergency. And if for some reason it so happened that a person missed his salah, for example, a person made all the means that he or she should wake up for Fajr salat. The alarms were set, double alarms were also set, but then to a person slept through it, but the means were made, and then a person woke up and found it is already sunrise, etc. Now a person performs qaza afterwards. That is different because a person made the means to try and wake up, they couldn't do so, and now in the same way if a person goes to sleep after Zuhr Salah hoping to wake up for Asr Salah, and it so happens now they oversleep and they wake up Maghrib time, now it became qaza. Or a person is in such a position wherein they had no way at all wherein they could have performed the salat. So that is different than if a person makes qaza. Otherwise, to deliberately do so is haram. But obviously, if a person's salah does go, then a person should do qaza of it. But a person deliberately shouldn't do so. And the reason why we are doing this, and the reason why this happens, is because we haven't made amal upon hafizu ala salawat. We haven't safeguarded our salat. If we had safeguarded our salat, then under all conditions we would have made sure that we get our salats ada. And in the winter period, when salats are very close with each other, there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easy for us. Those people who, because of their work or university studies, whatever, can't make it to the masajid for the first salat itself with the jamaat, then there are ways that they can combine their salats. Wherein now they can combine it in a way wherein each salat is performed in its own time, but they are performed close to each other. Wherein either Zuhur salat can be delayed slightly, so it's read a bit later on, and a person then reads the Asr salat a little early, but in its own time. Time is very important. So we find Hafizu ala salawat also refers to a person being punctual upon the time of salat. Time of salat is very, very important. The salat is performed within its time. Sayyidina Ibn Masud Allah Ta'ala asked Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and mentioned, tell me what are those amal, those actions which are beloved to Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala. Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned, as-salatu ala waqtiha. The salat performed upon its time is from the ahabbul amali in Allah, from the most beloved amal, deeds beloved by Allah, liked by Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala. So it is salat performed upon its time and not performed qaza'an. So in the same way a person will do it this way, or a person will read the Zuhr salat in the lunch period if the time falls in that period of time, and the Asr salat can be delayed till it's time, close to the time of Maghrib, as long as it doesn't elapse in the other time. Deliberately to do so, obviously to delay any salat, this is also makruh, to read it in the makruh times. But if a person now has no option and a person is busy at work, then it won't become makruh for that person. The ruling of it being makruh will be lifted for that person as long as they still perform it within its time. So in this way it becomes easy for a person, and they can accommodate for their salats. If we can accommodate for so many other things, then definitely we can accommodate for our salat, that is, if we want to do so. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Hafizu ala salawati wa salati al-wusta wa qumu lillahi qanitin, and stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qanitin, with humility. With humility, humbleness. This verse was revealed in order to abrogate the ruling wherein previously in early days it was permissible for people to talk in salat. And we know various ahkam rulings were revealed and mentioned gradually. So initially it was permissible for people to greet each other and speak of necessity in the salat. Then وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ changed this ruling, because now obviously if a person talks in salat, there isn't a person's concentration, it is contrary to a person's concentration. Thereafter we find the various Sahaba came and spoke to Nabi Kareem Sallallahu, greeted him, and he wouldn't greet them. There were those who had missed this verse, and when they came back to Madinah Munawwara, they were speaking to those in salah, and those in salah wouldn't reply to their salam. They wondered what's wrong with them, have they become munafiq or what? But then, because they weren't aware of it, and then they knew of this verse, and now it's not permissible for them to speak whilst in salat. Talking about nifaq, these Sahaba thought that because he hasn't greeted me or replied to my greeting, he has become a munafiq. And according to the Sahaba, a sign of nifaq, of a person becoming a munafiq, was that they wouldn't see that person in the masjid. If we were to take the signs of the Sahaba, what they would regard to be a munafiq, how many of us would be spared? Wherein we walk past our Muslim brothers, we don't greet them. Either they'll greet us, we don't reply. How many times happens we greet and they don't reply? Or they'll greet us, we don't reply, or none of the two. Neither will we greet and neither will they greet. Because for some reason we think that you should only greet the person that you recognize. If it is somebody that you know, somebody of your own brotherhood, of your own brotherhood, of your own relationships, of your own type, of somebody in your community, somebody you know, a friend, only that person should be greeted. And if it's a stranger, even though it is a Muslim, then we think for some reason we should be greeting that person. And so many times you find when you do greet the person, out of astonishment, they will look at you wondering how come we greeted them. So for some reason they start wondering, does this person know me or what? Where have we met? So even that person starts wondering that for what has he greeted me for? Is there something I've missed here or what? Whereas what they don't realize is that salat, if you salam bainakum, unfortunately we find when we're supposed to do salam, we don't do salam then, and when we're not supposed to do salam, we do salam then. As I mentioned on the Eid's day, how after Eid Salat everybody starts hugging and kissing on Eid Salat. The same person who you didn't greet when he came out of the car, walks to the car park, walks into the masjid with, you didn't greet that person then, but after Salam, after Salat is finished, then you're hugging and kissing that person. And the same person you see later on, you won't greet them. But now you greet them. You walk into the masjid together with that person, you don't greet anything, and after Salat, you rest Salat next to each other, you don't know that person, and now after Salat, after Salam is done, and now you start wanting to hugging and kissing that person. So it just shows how contradicting we are, how we've got our priorities totally wrong. So for them, a sign of nifaq was that they were not greeted, and the other sign of nifaq was that they would find that whoever wouldn't come into the masjid, they realized that this person is probably a munafiq. So even the munafiqeen were punctual with the 5 times salat with jamaat. Because they knew that they didn't want the secret to be let out. So in order to conceal the secret and to show the nifaq, remain a proper munafiq, a successful munafiq, even they were punctual on the 5 times salat with jamaat. My dear friends, we might laugh and joke at it, but we should think, if the Sahaba, or just one Sahabi was around today and walk around and see the conditions of our masajid, then in the eyes of that Sahabi, so many of us would also be a munafiq. Because how many of us attend the masjid? And obviously here we hafiz ala salawat. We'll refer to the men also protecting, safeguarding the masajid. Because if the masajid people are performing the salah, the masajid will be occupied, the masajid will also be safeguarded. But here we find a case wherein, unfortunately, the masajid have to open at a certain time, close at a certain time, close in between salat times. Why? Because the only Muslims who will come are those who read the salat, and if Jamaat go home and that's it, you won't find anybody else who will come and read the salat in between or so. You won't find people punctual and remaining in the masajid for long periods of time. You wish, if they were doing so, the masajid could stay open and the masajid would be secure. Obviously the masajid needs to be closed for security reasons, but if people were occupying the masajid, then that would also secure the masajid. So a person will be securing their own salat, and at the same time they will be securing the masajid. But our case is, my dear friends, we know ourselves, as I mentioned in Jummah Salah today, what a big difference there is from last week's Jummah and this week's Jummah. And the only difference is, it's still the month of November, we're still in the same era, there's no quantum leap year or anything like that, not back into the future, anything like that happening here. In the same era, the same zamana, everything. The only difference is that last week Jummah it was the month of Ramadan, this week Jummah in the month of Shawwal. But what a huge change we see in our homes, in our masajid, and within our own lives. The same homes which for the last previous 29-30 days became centers of deen, Islamic centers, became zawiyas, khanqahs, became madrasas, where all the shayateen were put aside, and from morning to evening there would be the various dhikr taking place in the homes, the various tilawats taking place, the various wazifas read, du'as being done in the house, cassettes, the hi-fis will be playing various CDs and cassettes of various Quran reading, the qira'ats, etc. The receivers will be also doing overtime, various programs, one salat after the other salat, after other salats, various programs and everything taking place. This was the condition of our homes last week Jummah. And the following Jummah we find that the same hi-fis from which the qira'at was playing from, now we find what all sorts of filth are playing from it. The same receivers which were so utilized last week are now put aside, boxed up and put away for the next Ramadan. The Qurans that were completed, these are now packed away and put away in its covers, into the shelves for the following Ramadan. This is the condition of our homes. Our masajid also become such that we know already what the case is. In the month of Ramadan, masajids are full, the courtyards are full, the classrooms and everything is full. And then when it's the Fajr of the Eid Salat, you find that it becomes half. Because when a person is obviously on a sprint, and once they finish the finish line, they just come to stand and stop. They slow down a bit and then they stop. So you find that's the same case with us also. In the month of Ramadan, we're all sprinting, we're all doing good deeds, which is good, mashallah, we need to do so. And then when it's the day of Eid, the Fajr of Eid, we slow down. We don't stop immediately, but we do a bit of slow one. That's why half the masjid is there for Fajr Salat. And immediately after the 2nd of Shawwal, that's it. The normal, regular 2-3 musallis are there, and everybody else is gone. So already if a person doesn't know, already you'll know just by looking at the masajids, the difference that comes about. And then a person looks at their own lives to find such a great difference within themselves. And something which I mentioned which is very important in Jummah Salat, and repeat, because obviously not every person managed to hear it at that time and everybody was here. That is, we do not take hisab account of our life after the month of Ramadan. In the month of Ramadan, we like to take hisab. We ask each other, oh, how many khatams did you do? How much Quran did you read? And we like to boast, I completed 5, 6, 10 Qurans and this, that, which is good. Alhamdulillah, it's good. Muslims should vie with each other in good things, which is good. So we like to boast with regards how good we did and how much we did in the month of Ramadan. So we take account of what we did in that month. But why do we not take account of our lives before the month of Ramadan, the month of Sha'ban, and take account of our lives in the month of Shawwal, and compare the two? There is no point in comparing what we did in the month of Ramadan, because in reality, any person, even the weakest of Muslims, alhamdulillah, he or she progresses and does something more than they normally would do in a month of Ramadan. So, for a person to think that, look, this is what I was doing in the month of Ramadan, so now I've changed, my life has changed, is premature. It's premature thoughts. A person in the month of Ramadan can't judge whether they've changed or not. To see whether you've changed or not, judge yourselves outside and immediately after the month of Ramadan. And now compare the month of Sha'ban with the month of Shawwal and see is there any difference or not. If a person finds that they have changed, that in the month of Sha'ban they were not punctual on certain things, ibadat, etc., now they're punctual upon it. There are certain sins that they are committing now in Shawwal, they've left those sins, then that person can truly say that yes, they have benefited from the blessings of the month of Ramadan, they have spent the month of Ramadan correctly, and their lives have now changed. And if a person finds that their lives are exactly the same, no change whatsoever, whatever they were not doing, they're still not doing, what they were doing, they're still doing, then there's no change at all in that person. And if you find that person who was a little better, were not doing certain sins, or was doing certain amount of ibadat, but now outside and after the month of Ramadan they find that they're not doing those ibadat, and the sins that they were not doing, now they find that they're doing. So they've actually gone downhill. This stock a person doesn't take. This accounting a person doesn't do. Wherein they judge both the periods of time and think to themselves. It is for this reason that we find that there is no change within us in the remaining months after Ramadan. Now this is what I'm mentioning. I think you've heard me mention this a few times recently. On the day of Eid also mentioned it, in the last few days of Ramadan also, over and over mentioning this. Why? Because it is very, very important. In the month of Ramadan, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of momentum, there's a lot of josh, there's a lot of ibadat, everything taking place. The momentum is very high. But after that, as soon as Ramadan finishes, everything goes totally flat. Everything just goes away, it just becomes flat. And then you find people now just waiting for the next month of Ramadan. The next Ramadan comes, again the momentum is high, flat again, high, flat, high, flat. And then what happens is, in this way a person spends and passes so many Ramazans of their lives, years and years go by and there's no change in a person's life. Why? Because we only change in the month of Ramadan. For some reason we just adorn ourselves with the clothing of taqwa in this month and then we put it aside. The way a person adorns himself on the day of Eid with special clothes and put it aside for the next Eid, and those clothes are special just for the day of Eid only. We'll only wear this on the day of Eid and then it's put away and then worn again on the next Eid. In the same way we've made taqwa the same. That only in the month of Ramadan we adorn ourselves with taqwa. When Eid is there and then we take taqwa away, we put it away. So we put the tasbeehs and the Qurans and the Qiraat CDs and everything, we pack them away nicely. Make sure it's packed nicely also. Because out of respect of its Qiraat CDs, Qurans and these things, tasbeeh, riyal and these things, so rihals and that, so pack them away nicely. Cover them up nicely, sellotape them as well. So that obviously, if you want to take it out during the year, it becomes even more difficult to do so. So you say, forget this, take it out in the month of Ramadan now. So these things are nicely packed away and where also on the top shelves, on top cupboards, in the attic somewhere. So no bad takes place, no disrespect, anything takes place. But what you don't realize, my dear friends, is the greatest disrespect that we do is the way we treat the Quran and the way we treat taqwa in our deen. Islam isn't there just for the month of Ramadan. The command of hijab isn't there just only for the month of Ramadan. That in the month of Ramadan, the mothers and sisters now start wearing the cloaks and covering their hair. The fact that they do so much is also a good thing. In a time wherein, once upon a time you'd find, alhamdulillah, almost every home this would be practiced, but today you find even in the month of Ramadan, people have become so behaya that even in the month of Ramadan, they've got no regard for the month of Ramadan. There was still that case wherein they had a little bit of haya, although it was just the nifaq form. But at least there was just that bit of haya, that even if they didn't want to, but knowing that, okay, it's the month of Ramadan, so people would walk out in a modest way. People would remain in a modest way. As I mentioned so many times, a person goes somewhere and the women folk, they see somebody with a beard and they think every beard person is now a mullah, maulvi. So they see that person, immediately they start putting the dupatta on. They start putting the dupatta on when they see that person, and when the person goes, back off again. But at least they had that bit of haya, sharab. Whereas now you find that's not the case. But now the maulvi goes there and they say, how can I help you, love? That's how it's become. Our own Muslim females will be speaking in such a way with people, with respectable people. So this shows us how much haya we have lost. And actually now it's become a case when previously at least the whole dupatta went on, now it's a case of just half and then put down again. So this just seems, okay, they're putting the dupatta down. So we have lost it greatly. But whoever does just a little bit, that is also good. That at least should be maintained. But what we need to realize is that it is not only for the month of Ramadan, but taqwa should remain with us outside the month of Ramadan. Now if you are getting fed up of hearing the same thing, last few years I haven't mentioned this year specifically I've been mentioning this because I've realized this is the reason why we're not changing. In a month of Ramadan, how everybody changes. People change so beautifully, but then it's not maintained. The reason being is because we've just thought that Ramadan is the only month wherein we need to change and do things only for that month. We don't take stock of our lives after the month of Ramadan. This is why there's no change coming in us. And my dear friends, the amount of life we have till now, the person has to just count how many Ramazans they have passed and think to themselves, where are they compared to the amount of Ramazan that they have passed? And a person doesn't know whether they're going to live to see the next Ramazan or even one more Ramazan at all. And this notion that no, next Ramazan I'll change. For some reason we have either Hajj or Ramazan. We make these two things as an excuse. And there are those people who even make this as an excuse, that they think that they can only go for Hajj when they've changed their lives. There are those people upon whom Hajj becomes farz financially, Hajj becomes farz. But they say, no, until I'm not reading my salat yet, once I start performing my salat, once I make tawbah, once I start covering my hair, once I start keeping a beard, then I'll go for Hajj. Whereas with regards to the rulings of Hajj, there's no rulings in the Quran or Hadith or no faqih. None of the fuqaha have added this condition that Hajj only becomes farz once you become practicing. But the criterion is on finance. The moment financially Hajj becomes farz upon that person, it is farz immediately that same year. So this is one excuse we make for delaying Hajj. And the other excuse for changing our lives is we say Ramzan. Inshallah, Ramzan comes, I'll stop smoking. Ramzan comes, I'll stop listening to music. Ramzan comes, I'll stop watching movies. Ramzan comes, I'll stop shaving my beard. Ramzan comes, I'll start wearing the hijab. This is the excuse we make. And then Ramzan comes also, and a person's nafs, obviously a person's inner self reminds one that remember what your intentions were. The person says, yeah, I'll change, I will change. In this way, it's okay, it's just the first days of Ramzan. Let Ramzan set in. Let it set in, let I get a feel of it, and yes, I'll change. In this setting in, you find the first few days goes, and then before the first 10 days go, never mind, there's still 20 days left, we're still settling in. And by then, the middle 10 days have also gone. And then you say, never mind, well, Laylatul Qadr is coming, or make Tawbah, Istighfar, the midnights are coming, there's still 10 days left. And before you know, it's already the last night. The last night, and you already know now the Imam Sahib has made Ilan that tomorrow is the day of Eid. And then obviously the thoughts come in mind, look, I was supposed to change, but now what? So then the person says, look, now it's too late. Now it's late, I've missed the chance, so okay, inshallah, next day now. And then the person waits. The whole year they think they've got now a valid excuse to remain in the condition that they are in to change the following year. And this circle continues and continues throughout the person's life. And you know what I'm talking about. We all know what I'm talking about. We all face this where we say this Ramzan for sure, this Ramzan for sure, and that doesn't happen at all. And when last we thought this and how many years have passed, and look at our conditions. Unfortunately, we like to take hisab accounts of many things, but we don't take hisab of ourselves. In Umar Allah Ta'ala mentioned that take hisab account of yourself before your account is taken. On the day of resurrection, things are going to be taken to account then. So before somebody else and others are told to do it, take account and take stock now when you are alive. And it will make it easy, the stock taking easy in the hereafter. Because when the stock taking takes place in the hereafter, then it's not a matter of years. If I live for 60 years, and 60 years, that's the 60 once a year stock taking. And there is the case, my dear friends, of every second of a person's life. Just imagine if that starts. If the hisab starts of every second of our lives, my dear friends, we all know we're not going to make it through. We're not going to make it through. But that person who prepares beforehand and makes hisab already of themselves in this world will be saved from that hisab in the hereafter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all Jannat without any hisab and enable us to make hisab account ourselves in this world. Now coming back to this before we miss these verses, because I'd like to finish this ruku off because the next ruku is some other verses and in between then it will be inappropriate. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِنْ خِفْتُ that حَافِظُوا عَلَى الصَّلَوَاتِ be punctual, meaning safeguard your salat, specifically the Asr salat, and stand in front of Him with humility. And this also shows us that when a person stands in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, person should realize who they're standing in front, they should stand with humility. So not that a person stands with their legs east and west, wide apart. We don't stand in front of the bosses in that way. You don't go, if you're somebody in the office, nobody stands there, legs wide apart and that. Nobody stands in front of anyone in this world in such an arrogant manner. So when you stand in front of the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then obviously a person should stand with great humility. This is how a person should stand in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because in the same way when a person stands in front of somebody, if you say it's rude to look here and there, if somebody's talking to you or you're talking to somebody and you're standing here, they're looking around. In the same way we find we stand in our salat, so we're reading salat but we're looking around here and there. In the same way if somebody talks to us or we're talking to somebody else but we find we're not concentrating, that person will also get upset, look, concentrate. I'm talking to you, you're standing in front of me, you're not concentrating. In the same way we find we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lips are moving but our minds are not concentrating. So here for 18, all these things come into it. The person should stand with humility in the courts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the same way we know respectable people who cover their heads. And when we cover our heads in the streets and elsewhere in front of other people, and all the more we should be covering our heads in salat. So you find a person will cover their heads other times. If the sun is there, they will wear a baseball bat, caps and these things. But when it comes to the real moment of when the head should be covered, they don't cover their heads in salat. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned in the hadith that he will cover his head when he will go to relieve himself. So when a person goes to the toilet, the person should cover the head. So if a person covers the head when they go to a place like that, then all the more a person should cover the head when they go to a respectable place. And the fact that those who say that there's no mention any hadith which says specifically that the condition of salat is the topi, the head, the cap. Yes, obviously we all know if a person performs salat without a topi, without a cap, it doesn't invalidate the salat. But it is makruh to do so because it is against the sunnat. And against the sunnat means that there is no hadith to say that Nabi Kareem would wear the cap, wear the topi when he would perform his salah. But there are so many hadiths which show us that it was the continuous practice of Nabi Kareem that he would either have a cap on, a topi on, or he would have a turban on. So when these were always with him, then there's no reason for this to be mentioned specifically that he would wear it. We don't find anywhere where it says Nabi Kareem would wear his loincloth or he would wear a sheet over him and perform his salah. Because obviously this was done. The sattar was always concealed, so there's no reason for it to be mentioned that he would cover his sattar to perform the salah because it was covered. So the head would be covered, the topi or the turban would be on the head for Nabi Kareem to perform. And talking about topi and turban also, my dear friends, predominantly Nabi Kareem wore a turban. Within the home, there were times where in the home he would take the turban off and he would wear only a topi. Otherwise, Nabi Kareem predominantly always wore a turban, and specifically whenever Nabi Kareem went out of the home, he always had his turban on. Which means that this is also a great sunnat which we need to revive. It is a sunnah which needs to be revived, because we find this sunnah has also left us. And it is a great sunnah. Person performs salat with the turban, the reward is multiplied 70 times. It creates awe on a person. That's why people fear the pagriwala, isn't it? Naturally, because Nabi Karim Sallallahu himself mentioned that it creates awe in that person because of the turban. So this is, you don't need any security guards, no need to fear anybody. Wear a turban and that's it, everybody else will fear you. So our protection is also in it. And there's so many other things that a person can do with it. Person knows about those places wherein people wear turbans most of the time. Those turbans are utilized for so many things. It can be utilized as a cloth, it can be utilized to cover themselves, it can be utilized as a sheet also, it can be utilized as a bandage also. There's so many things that it can be utilized with. So this is also a sunnah that we should revive. And those who punctually wear turbans, they should also now and then not wear turban, especially within the home. So in this way they're reviving both the sunnahs of wearing a turban outside the home and not wearing the turban within the home. So this was قُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا. Then He says, thus if you fear, meaning that if you fear an enemy, فَرِجَالًا, perform it standing, أَوْ رُكْبَانًا, or whilst mounted. This is with regards when a person now fears the enemy. That if you're in a condition wherein you're in the midst of battle and you fear the enemy may attack you, if you now move aside, put your musalla down and face Qibla and read in that manner, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَرِجَالًا. Then just read your salat standing. Because you know now if you're going to go into ruku or you're going to go into sajda, you don't know from which area the enemy might attack you, then you can perform it standing. أَوْ رُكْبَانًا. If you're mounted on your conveyance and you know that you're going to come off it, then the enemy will attack you. The safe thing is to remain on it, then stay on your conveyance and perform it whilst you're mounted. And Fuqaha mentioned that in that condition, even if a person isn't in the direction of Qibla, they should still perform their salat. But this is during time of fear, and not fear of rain or fear of snow or ice, anything like that. This is in the midst of battle, obviously, when a person now fears the enemy. Or in another occasion where obviously a person knows the enemy, somebody is going to now hijack somebody, somebody is going to come and attack somebody. When in that midst of fear, then also a person is told, فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا. Now let's just see this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that even in that condition, still perform your salat. Although you don't perform it as you normally would, but then still perform it, even if you mean standing and just making ishara for ruku and sajda, where you bend a bit for ruku and a little bit more than that for sajda, even that is sufficient for you to perform your salat. So if that is the case in time of fear, in the midst of battle also we told not to forgo our salat, and in the midst of our comforts of our homes, then what? So this shows how far we have gone from the straight path. Where in our comforts we don't perform our salat at all, nama bil ishara or sitting, no salat whatsoever. So if this is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then how much more we should be punctual in our salat under normal conditions. That's why then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِذَا أَمِنْتُمْ. If you are now in peace, meaning that now you are in normal conditions, then فَذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, referring to salat, كَمَا عَلَّمَكُمْ مَا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ, the way we taught you, مَا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ, that which you do not know. Referring to the salat. Because obviously we didn't know how to perform salat until it was taught to us in the Quran by Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِذَا أَمِنْتُمْ, now when you are in peace, meaning you're not in the midst of battle, when there's no fear whatsoever, there now you don't perform it standing or mounted, there you don't perform it away from the direction of Qibla, just making signs, etc. Then فَذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ, remember Allah, meaning perform your salah, كَمَا عَلَّمَكُمْ, how you've been taught, meaning in a correct and a normal manner. For the next verses, there isn't too much tafseer of it. وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ. Now here again, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes back to the rulings, the mention of talaq and meher and these things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was mentioning previously. Now the reason why this comes in between is because we know salat is one of the most important, but the most important ibadat. The first thing the person will be questioned about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings this in the midst of the rulings of meher, talaq, iddat and these things, in order to show us that look, just the way this is an important ibadat, even all these things are also ibadat, And just the way you see to this, the huququllah, the rights of Allah, also be punctual with regards to huququl ibad. Because in talaq, huququllah is also there, and huququl ibad. The way in which a person divorced, the way they marry, whether they give them her or not, how they treat each other, and all these things, it's all included in huququllah and huququl ibad. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ, those who die from amongst you, وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا, and they leave behind their wives, وَصِيَّةً لِأَزْوَاجِهِمْ, they should make a bequest, لِأَزْوَاجِهِمْ, for their wives, مَتَاعًا, of maintenance, إِلَى الْحَوْلِ, for a year, غَيْرَ إِخْرَاجٍ, without allowing them to leave. Somebody's opening and closing the door every now and then. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here mentions that whoever dies from you and they leave their wives, they should make a bequest, a wasiyat, of 1 year's maintenance. Now this verse, we must realize, this verse has been abrogated, mansukh. And this verse was prior to when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed the shares given to the heirs of the deceased. Previously, we know that, which we covered recently, that when a widow, when her husband dies, the iddat used to be 1 year. The iddat used to be an entire year. So, and this was then changed, and the iddat was then 4 months and 10 days. 4 months, it was changed to then 4 months and 10 days. And which we just did very recently. Ashurim wa Ashra, which we just covered recently. So prior to that, the iddat was a full year in the days of Jahiliyyah, and then it was changed. Now when there was still no ruling with regards the inheritance, this was the command. That a person before he dies, he should make a wasiyat bequest, that his wife should be allowed to stay in his home for the entire year, and she will be maintained from the estate of the deceased. This was the ruling at the time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referring to this says, وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ, whoever dies from you, وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا, and they leave behind their wives, وَصِيَّةً لِأَزْوَاجِهِمْ, they should make a bequest for their wives, مَتَاعًا, of maintenance, إِلَى الْحَوْلِ, for a year, غَيْرَ إِخْرَاجٍ, without making them leave the home, without them leaving the home, so they should stay within the home for the iddat and beyond that. But then فَإِنْ خَرَجْنَا, if they do go out, this refers to outside after the 4 months and 10 days. So the iddat was 4 months and 10 days. After that, if they do go out, then فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ, there won't be any sin upon you, meaning the deceased and the family members. Because now she can go out because she's completed her iddat, but she should be maintained. So فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي مَا فَعَلْنَا فِي أَنفُسِهِنَّ مِنْ مَعْرُوفٍ, there won't be any sin upon you with that which they do to themselves in a good manner. Which means that if they now remarry in a halal way after the iddat, etc., they are allowed now to leave the home of the husband, go back to their own mother's place, their own homes. They can marry after that period of time. There won't be anything, any sin upon the deceased. Wallahu Azizul Hakim, and Allah is Almighty and is all wise. Now this was the first revelation, this was revealed first, that this was the case of the widow. But then when the rulings of inheritance were revealed, then this verse, all the fuqaha and mufassirin unanimous, that this verse has now been abrogated, and the ruling is now straightforward, that the deceased, the wife, should either inherit 1/8 or 1/4 of the deceased. If a husband dies, she'll inherit either 1/8 with children and 1/4 without children. So according to her circumstances, this is how much she will inherit. Because of that, this now has been mansukh, which means that the only time she will be maintained is within her iddat period. She is maintained. After that, she won't be maintained from the husband. Whatever is her share from his estate, that will be given to her. After that, she is separate to go her own way. وَلِلْمُطَلَّقَاتِ مَتَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ, and for those who have been divorced, for those women who have been divorced, مَتَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, some maintenance should be given to them according to customs, حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ, which is a right upon the pious. Here this refers to various different things. In the last week's session we did how the various different rulings with regards to the mahar. There will be those occasions wherein a mahr is either stipulated or non-stipulated, either the marriage is consummated or is not consummated. So the various different rulings we did last week, that if the marriage is consummated, a mahr is mentioned, then obviously that full mahr will be given. If no mahr is mentioned and if it's consummated, the mahr misl will be given. If it's not consummated and no mahr has been fixed, then a person should just give something appropriate to the wife if divorce takes place. If a mahr is mentioned and the marriage is not consummated, talaq takes place, then this half of it will be given. So this mata'un bil ma'ruf, either it refers to that wajib which has to be given, it refers to the mahr. And if no mahr at all has been given, then it is mustahab that when divorce takes place, the husband should give something as a gift to the wife. Either it can just be a few pieces of cloth, a few clothing, etc., some necessities. This is mustahab to give to the one that he divorces. So at least they united in a good way. When they did get married with each other, all gifts were given. And now when they depart also apart from each other, there are also a few gifts to be given. So at least some form of goodness remains within the families, and not like us that when divorce takes place then it's world war, it becomes war between the two families. كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَلِكَ, in this manner, يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ, Allah clarifies for you and He mentions for you آيَاتِهِ, His verses, His commands, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you understand. And of this injunction He completes making mention of that of talaq, and then other things are mentioned. And we find that in quite a few rukus Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned talaq. And then at the end, so clearly He says that in this way, what more would you want? يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ, so openly bayan has been made of it. And in such a way that is all the rulings are mentioned in the Quran. If you don't understand it, the ahadith is there to explain to you. If you can't understand that, then you have the people of the Quran and the hadith, mufassirin, muhaddithin, who mention it to you. So in this way, at all times, there will be those people who will mention and openly show the people the right way and the various injunctions, the various rulings with regards nikah, talaq, iddat, mahr, etc. Why? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you think, so that you get some understanding from it, so that you think with regards what you do. And as I mentioned in the start of the bayan of talaq, and I mentioned again also, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so the person thinks before they issue the talaq, and the person thinks that let me first find out what are the rulings with regards to talaq before I do issue the talaq. And not how it is today in the country, where a person issues the talaq and then afterwards starts worrying and then tries to find out what's this ruling. It's no point afterwards phoning up and asking the Mufti then that is talaq done or not, but I didn't mean it, and these various excuses. Think beforehand. Beforehand, think for a while, look, this is my intention, I'm so angry that I feel like giving my wife talaq, let me phone the Mufti and ask him, look, if I do this, what's the consequences? But nobody then phones. Nobody then thinks, let me open the Quran and see what the injunctions are. If I do this, what will the consequences be? What does the kitab say? They can't understand themselves, ask any alims or mufti, etc. They won't think then. But then afterwards, when it's too late, and when they themselves already know the fatwa, they know what the answer is, then there's no point dining with the mufti and asking the mufti, does talaq take place or not? Then it's too late. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look, so openly these things have been mentioned to you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you think for a moment, and you do things in a good, sane manner. Not you do things in an insane way, but in a correct manner. And whoever does things correctly, obviously the consequences, the circumstances, everything is going to be so correct for that person. So a person will always find great intellect and great intelligence if they do things according to what is mentioned in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives all the tawfiq to understand these verses, make amal upon them, and specifically the verse that we did today with regards Hafizu ala salawati wa salatul wusta, of us not just performing our salat, but safeguarding our salat, that under no cost whatsoever should we be foregoing our salat. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq to spend the remaining of our months of this year even better than how we spent the month of Ramadan. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.